Hi, I'm Heather Hubbard. I went from being a lawyer and partner at one of the largest firms in America to becoming an online personality and successful entrepreneur. I know what it takes to rise to the top. I also know all too well the toll it can take on your health and personal life. So, how do you shine bright without burning out? How do you chase joy while achieving success? You're listening to the Hustle and Flow podcast. Welcome back to Hustle and Flow. I am your host, Heather Hubbard, and we are on episode 244, and we have special guest Gina Knox. Gina is a financial coach for entrepreneurials with variable income. She teaches entrepreneurs how to become debt-free, pay their taxes, and have savings funded in 6 months or less in her 12-month program, Small Business Money School. And then she helps her clients create a 7-figure wealth portfolio with her mastermind, 7-Figure Wealth. Over her career as a coach, Gina has helped her clients save over $6 million in less than 3 years. Gina is a Mexican mom, an art school grad, a designer, a hobby potter, a world traveler, and a money nerd. Gina, thank you so much for coming on the show.
Thank you for having me. And just a little correction there. We're now at $8.8 million in client savings.
Wow.
Yeah.
That is truly amazing. And I love how you actually track and share that from a marketing and sales perspective. It's just really smart. So kudos for doing that.
I mean, if you look at my Instagram, I like to go down to the penny. So I know it's $8,863,395.06. We go
you
down
are a
to
money
the penny.
nerd.
I am a money nerd. Well, because here's my thing. I'm like, every time I see someone talk about a big number and they round it, I'm like, oh, they're rounding it. I'm like, no, I'm not rounding it. If anything, I'm rounding down.
You help people pay down business debt and you help them build up business savings.
Yes.
What I would love to hear is, why do you think it is so important to not have business debt, and why it's so important to actually have business savings? Because I know a lot of people who are listening probably have debt and don't have savings, and they're like, is it that important?
Yeah. It's not that important to not have business debt. I want to say that at the beginning. Debt is a tool that business owners use to grow their companies. Before I became a money coach for business owners, I actually spent 5 years as a small business researcher at QuickBooks, where my job was to interview business owners about their finances to make sure that we were making QuickBooks helpful, right? And I think at this point, I've probably seen 1,000 P&Ls in various industries, various income levels, all of it. And I can literally think of 5 people off the top of my head who've never touched business debt over the course of their business. 5 out of 1,000. Most people have business debt. Business debt is not the enemy. The problem happens when you feel like you are have you ever jumped into the ocean and then the waves keep coming and coming and you feel like you're getting pushed under and it's really scary?
Yeah.
If debt feels like that to you, we're doing something wrong. And we want to fix that. But a lot of times what debt can feel like is, okay, I am using somebody else's capital to grow my company in an intentional way, and I'm tracking the metrics, and the amount of money I'm spending on interest is less than the amount of money I'll make in return. That is fabulous. A lot of people don't get there though, because they don't know how, right? Debt is not a skill that's taught. Debt payoff is a skill that's taught, but debt utilization is not a skill that's taught. So we want to do that for sure. And then also, because so many of us feel so bad about having debt, we feel so shameful and embarrassed that our first instinct is we just have to pay it off as quickly as possible. So in my program, what we do is we map it all out. We talk about how to pay it down, but then we also talk about how to go from that, debt is using you to you are using debt.
Wow. Say that again.
Debt is using you to you are using debt.
Oh, wow. Yeah, that is really impactful.
And I work in a female dominated industry, and I used to work in a male dominated industry in tech in Silicon Valley. And in Silicon Valley, I just saw men building companies and like bragging about how much debt they were in or bragging about how much VC funding they got. And in this female dominated industry, the coaching industry, I see the internalized misogyny around debt. The I must be a bad person. I must be frivolous. I must have spent it wrong. I have to get out of debt as quickly as possible. And I just noticed that like male entrepreneurs are not having those conversations. They're not having those thoughts. And so I think
Mhm.
there's a lot of layers here. It is not just pay off your debt and save on interest. Like that's the bare minimum.
Well, so I know I asked about savings, but now that you say that,
Yeah.
I have actually seen many female entrepreneurs brag
Mm.
about how they have built things without anyone else's money and they
Yeah.
are debt free. So
Yeah.
all of their decisions relate to, have I saved this money before I ever
Right.
spend the money? And it's a real badge of honor, as opposed, and right, and so sometimes it does make you feel bad if you aren't doing it that way. So I'd actually, instead of, we will get to savings, but I'm curious because I sometimes struggle with when to reinvest profits into my business. For many years, any money that I made in the business, I just reinvested it in the business because my theory was, if I reinvest it, it will help me grow and, scale the business. But what happened was I ended up creating a habit of not paying myself.
Oh,
And so I often struggle with, and I have a feeling that you've got some really strong opinions on this. How do you know when to reinvest in the business versus pay yourself or save?
okay. At the core of your question is the thought error. I have to reinvest in the business or pay myself or save.
Ooh.
Why do you have to pick? You're forcing yourself to pick. And so then your actions are you pick. And so then you go along with that, right? But myself
Mhm.
and many of my clients, we don't pick. We can do both. I'm a strong proponent of paying yourself. I have a system that I teach my money school clients where we pay ourselves the same amount of money every month, regardless of sales. That is a
Mm.
non negotiable. And that's where savings come in. You need to have savings in order to do that during the lower cash months. We could talk about that in more detail
Mhm.
in a bit. But I am a strong proponent of like, I am a line item. In fact, I'm the most important line item. And why is it that whenever something comes up in the business, I'm the first to get cut? I see this with
Right.
reinvesting in the company, but I also see this with debt. I had a client once. We got her owner's pay up from $2,000 a month to $4,000 a month because her business could afford it and it was time and she had a lot of personal goals she wanted to hit, so we wanted to give her more money to hit those personal goals. And a month later, she comes back into the coaching container and she goes, "So I know we said we were going to do $4,000 a month, but the business had some unexpected debt come up, so I went back down to 2,000 to pay off the business debt." And I went, "Okay, I want you to imagine that you worked a 9 to 5 and your boss came to you and said, 'Hey, I know we gave you a raise, but the business has some debt to deal with. So you know what? Not only are we not going to give you the raise, we're going to pause your payroll for the next week. Is that okay?'" That's insane. That is insane behavior. And what I see business owners doing is they treat themselves worse financially than they would ever accept from any toxic boss. In fact, it's like the
Yes.
ultimate boss of toxic bosses, the way you're treating yourself financially. So, you need to be a line item in the business that is non negotiable. If you can't reinvest the profits, I'm putting that in air quotes because you're paying yourself,
Yeah.
guess what? That was never profit to begin with.
Mm.
That wasn't profit to begin with. Your pay is part of the monthly expenses. Whatever's left after that is profits. So I want you to make that shift, number one, if you're listening to this and you're thinking
Mhm.
that. But then number two, if you really need to invest in something right now and you don't have the money in your profit or in your bank account, then what is another way? Instead of going straight to cutting yourself, ask yourself, how can I get the money? Do I need to get a loan? Do I need to sell more things? By the way, that's our superpower. We can always go out and just sell another thing. What is another way? Can I collect on outstanding payments? Can I collect on outstanding invoices? Can I collect ahead of time? I have done this in the past where I have a program, right? So we have payment plans, like 5 payments of 500. And if I needed some cash, sometimes I'll just send a mass email to everyone on a payment plan and say, "Hey, I'll give you a free one-on-one call if you pay off the rest of your payment plan early. And guess what? I'll bring in an extra $5,000 of
Yeah.
cash that's already sitting in on the AR, on the accounts receivable. So I never think you have to pick.
It is definitely a mindset issue because I will say when, I used to have employees
Mhm.
and I would never not pay an employee. Like that
Right.
is just again
That's
insane,
insane.
absurd. But as the business owner, yes, there is this like mindset issue of, well, but if there's not enough money, I'll be the one. And I sometimes wonder if it is that perfectionism that comes in and it's like, well, I traded my job, that 9 to 5 for the autonomy and the freedom, and so this is just what goes with it, right? Like going into that sacrifice mode when that is not actually a long-term solution for a business and you're totally going to burn yourself out and get resentful. I mean,
Also,
because
like,
that's where I
is
am.
that freedom?
No. Yeah, that's
Is that freedom?
I know. And yet
And
it's so common among entrepreneurs.
it's so common. And what I'll say, I'll preface all of this with saying, if you're like feeling judged right now, like, oh, I've done that in the past, you did what you got to do, right? Like, there's
Yeah.
no judgment over past decisions. We all are just trying to get by and doing what we got to do. Let's think about, though, in the future, how do we want to set this thing up so that maybe I don't get on the chopping block every other month, right? So I
Right.
will say that,
Right.
like, same with debt. You did what you got to do. You're still here. I'm proud of you. And let's think about what we want to do differently moving forward.
So let's talk about the feast or famine cycle because, you do work with entrepreneurs that have
Mhm.
variable income and it makes it very difficult
Yeah.
to like you can do your cash flow projection, but if you don't hit your sales, if you don't hit your targets, then it's like, well, what did I do wrong here? So I'm
Mhm.
curious from your perspective, and I know you have an entire course and you can't go into all of that,
It's
but do
okay.
you have specific advice or a tip or even just a mindset shift on how to actually plan for and deal with that feast or famine cycle?
Yeah. Number one, this is maybe more for an entrepreneur in their first 3 years, let's say. Sign up for inconsistent income, meaning stop fighting against it. I see a lot of, especially those beginning entrepreneurs go, I just need to get to consistent income. I just need to get to consistent income. And then they spend a lot of energy trying to hit that goal. And they spend a lot of money investing back in their business on things to try and hit that goal. And I'm just letting you know right now, it's wasted energy. It's wasted money. You will
Mm.
always have inconsistent income in your business. No business has consistent income. I don't care the business model. And sorry, trigger warning. It's going to get worse as you scale. When you scale up, the inconsistency gets worse. This is not a problem to be solved. This is the nature of commerce. So I
Mhm.
say that to say, like, first things first, you're not doing anything wrong if your income is inconsistent. Everybody's income is inconsistent. And when I say inconsistent income, what I literally mean is the amount of money coming into your bank account will always be a different dollar amount every month. That's what I
Correct.
mean.
Yes.
Okay. So that's like our baseline understanding. If we believe that, and if we're like, okay, I'm on board, I don't have to solve that problem anymore, then what problems are left to solve? There's a couple problems that are left to solve. Number one, how do you pay for expenses when you didn't bring in enough money to break even? It's really simple. It's just you use your savings. How do you save when you bring in a different amount of money every month? I teach a cash flow management system that is a banking system that helps you save. That's a problem that needs to be solved. How do I pay myself when I bring in a different amount of money every month? That's a problem. These are the problems that need to be solved, not inconsistent income. And then the other thing is like, okay, once we get there, then we can start being creative. I have a lot of clients who have seasonal businesses. So, wedding photographers, landscape architects. Like, I have a client whose whole business is setting up Christmas lights, highly seasonal, right? Okay.
Yes.
So, once we have those other systems, those other solutions to those problems, then we can get creative and be like, okay, well, what are other ways I could bring in money throughout the year? What else could I sell, right? Could I sell Halloween decorations? Could I sell 4th of July? I don't know. Could I sell other things? If I'm a wedding photographer, could I do brand photo shoots or family in the winter? But it's not coming from a place of I need consistent income and I must be doing it wrong if I don't have that. then to make it very, very, very simple, and it's going to almost sound too simplistic and you're going to not want to believe me, but I promise this is really just it. Your job is to save during high cash months and spend your savings during low cash months. That's it. That's the secret. $1 million secret right there. Um, and then there's a whole slew of problems with that. People tend to overspend during high cash months because they feel flush and they're like, now I can finally
Mhm.
invest in all the things I ever wanted to. What? Don't do that.
Yep.
You're wasting your money. You're going to need that capital later. Or they overpay themselves, or like because they're catching up on months of not having paid themselves. So now it's like the big payout is finally here. And then you're shooting yourself in the for the next month.
Mhm.
So there's problems there. There's also problems with entrepreneurs who never want to spend their savings. I get the money hoarders, the perfectionists, and they're like, Gina, savings are meant to be saved. Like, I'm not supposed to spend it. And I completely disagree. Savings are meant to be spent. In fact, every single dollar that you ever save in your life, whether in your business or in your personal finances, is designed to be spent. Money is meant to be spent, maybe at different times, maybe for different things. Some money spent meant to be spent for emergencies, some money is meant to be spent for retirement, right? But every dollar is meant to be spent. There's no reason to have cash in your bank that you're afraid to touch or use. And then I will say too, because this question comes up, I have in my system tax savings and we call it working capital are separate. So tax
Mm.
savings, yeah, we want to put it aside. And at the same time, I've had people dip into tax savings because sometimes we just got to get shit done and like we got to get through. It's okay. Let's change it for the future. But yeah, did that answer your question? I feel like I went through a lot.
Yes. No, absolutely. And so I'm curious, do you get people, so either they show up or you actually get objections from people who feel like their finances are in such a mess
Mhm.
or it's too embarrassing that they're like, I'm going to get it to here before I actually come into the program.
Yeah.
Or they're like, well, how I can't possibly do that because I'm in debt. Therefore, I've got to, dig myself out of the hole before I show up for Gina. When you and I both know that that's, and they do too, that if they could do that on their own, they already would have. But I'm just curious, does that show up in your work?
Oh, yeah. I get a lot of perfectionism, both in the business side and the wealth building, especially the wealth building side. Actually, I'm not ready to invest in the market. I'm not ready to build wealth. That's a whole slew of things. So that's like at the core of my business. I just solve for it really. So, I have a design background. I went to art school. I worked as a design researcher, very much in design. And one of the core philosophies of design is when you design for the extreme, you solve for everybody. A great example of this is, do you know that kitchenware company OXO? You maybe see them
I
at
do not.
Target or Walmart. They have really chunky handles for everything and it's all black and white.
Oh,
Mark.
okay. Yes.
Yeah. Okay.
Yes.
And it's black and white and then like a red X. They are designed for people with Parkinson's disease, all of it. And
Oh,
that's why everything is chunky and holdable and grippable because it's designed for, and Parkinson's and arthritis. So,
okay.
but they're wildly successful with people who have no mobility issues because when you design for an extreme case, you solve better for everybody. So I literally just, when I see people like that who are like, my books are such a mess or I'm in so much debt, I'm like, okay, yeah, we're solving for that every single day. And then it's just if there's a solution for it, all that's left is the feelings, the shame, the embarrassment, the despair, right? And we
Hmm.
can coach on those things. We can coach on those
Yeah.
things. I think this is also where, not to get too much into my offer or anything, but I think group coaching in general is so helpful because you just see you are just absolutely not the only one. In fact, you're more the rule than you are the exception if you have those things.
That's right.
Um, and when you come into a group and you're surrounded by other people openly talking about the thing you are most ashamed of, I think part of that goes away in a really like beautiful way. What was it? Who said this? Brene Brown, I think. Shame dies when stories are told in safe spaces.
Yeah.
Is that it? Did I get it right?
Yeah.
Okay.
I think I don't have it memorized,
Yeah, but
but that sounded like it to me.
something along those lines. Yeah. Yeah.
So let's talk about the wealth piece because it's not
Mhm.
just about paying down debt and saving, but you then say, okay, you should not be dependent on the business. Like that should be an option for you.
Yeah.
on whether or not you want to work. So tell us more about some of your favorite wealth building strategies, or why you think we should have wealth building strategies
Yeah.
outside of the business alone.
So I was at a event this weekend and Jerisha Hawk was there speaking. And I love the way she phrased it. She was like, you should have some active investments and some passive investments. For us, a business is one of the most active investments we can have, meaning it requires our time, our thought, our brains, our management, or other people's. And a passive investment, the way I define it is passive means zero work,
Hmm.
truly zero work. And if it requires any work, it is not passive. So, real estate, not passive, courses, not passive, digital downloads, not passive. None of that is passive. Because and let's take it to the most extreme example, if you die, those things stop. You can't make money beyond the grave with them. But the stock
Mhm.
market is the only thing that is truly passive and you can make money beyond the grave with. It's I won't get emotional. It's really important for me because my dad built wealth. He was the breadwinner. I'm one of four children. My mom was a stay-at-home mom for, 30 plus years. She still is, even though all her kids are grown. And my dad got diagnosed with a really rare, incurable cancer when he was 47. And there was a surgery. He went into remission, but it was always going to be a fatal cancer. Always. It's a very slow growing kind of cancer, which is lucky in its own way. And when he was 60, he was forced to retire early from a job he loved, not because he wanted to, but because his body literally gave him no other choice other than to stop. He was a lawyer, and the just the cancer medications he was on, he got to a point where he's like, I can't ethically practice law anymore because my mind isn't
Yeah.
clear. And when that happened, nothing bad happened to our family. We didn't lose the house. We didn't go into medical debt. My mom didn't have to go back to work, none of that. And we just got to be there and grieve with him and spend his last years with him in the house that he built in his dream home, and we were just surrounded by love, and money was just not the stressor in that moment. And when he passed away in 2021, so he was 63 years old, he was only in retirement for 3 years. Again, nothing bad happened. We didn't have to sell the family home. I always say, like, my dad was the breadwinner for my mom in his life, and he's still the breadwinner for her in his death because the portfolio he built is still paying her a monthly salary. So when
Yeah.
I say you need a form of passive income, it's not because I'm like, it's cute. It's not because it's cute, although it can be super cute, right? Like the luxury, the fun, the wealth, that's super fun. But you know what's way more important is we never know what's going to happen to us. And I don't want your only income to come from an investment, an active investment that requires you, especially if you cannot show up for that. And not even if
Mhm.
if it's your health, but like a lot of us have kids. What if our kids have something that require our full-time support or attention? What if we just don't want to work anymore? Like, forget even tragedy. Let's just think about, like, do you want to work for the rest of your life? A lot of my
Mhm.
entrepreneurs coming to objections, they go, well, Gina, I love my job. I want to work till I die. And I'm like, I love that for you. First of all, you may change your mind. Second of all, you may not have a choice. So I'm so passionate about it because I got the best case scenario. Truly, my family
Yeah.
got the best case scenario and it still sucked. But a lot of
Yes.
people have that scenario and then financial pressure and awfulness slapped on top of it. And it's it's preventable. No one has to go through that.
Yeah, life comes at you fast. I know I had to be out for a few years with a health issue that I had not planned for. I did not want to exit out. We had a podcast guest a few months ago. She was a dentist, and she had a hand injury. It wasn't an option. She had to stop. And obviously, there's some disability benefits you can get, but not always. Like with my illness, it took them forever to diagnose it. So, like,
Right.
you can't really move to that. And then you have children who get illnesses and parents who get illnesses. And sometimes you just want a sabbatical. So, having more, it's just options, right? Like, why not have the options? Why not have the safety and the security net? And the thing is, similar to as you were talking about earlier, no one really teaches the finance part. Often when we become entrepreneurs, we don't really have that skill set. Even those of us, I mean, I'm a lawyer. A lot of the people listening are lawyers. They may not even be entrepreneurs, but there are a lot of people listening who do have jobs where they have wealth, but they're not fully leveraging it. So I would love to hear kind of what you do in your seven-figure wealth mastermind to help people really start to put their money to work for them.
Yeah, I think the first thing to do is really to just dismantle all of the things that stop you from starting. So, just like in money school, just like in business finances, we think, oh, I have to have all these things in place first. And the reality is that with wealth building, you don't actually need to really have anything in place, but you do need to start. And the sooner you start, specifically with the stock market, the more wealth you will accumulate with the less amount of work and the less amount of capital. So the way I think about it is very simple. With my wealth portfolio, I am spending money to buy money. Okay. I am buying $1 million portfolio for $100,000.
Mm,
I'm spending money to buy money. The longer you wait to buy money, the more expensive it is. So if I wanted to have $1 million today, literally today, I would have to have $1 million already, right? Or like
right.
$990,000. So it would cost me $990,000 to buy $1 million today. But if I have a 1 year old and I want to buy them $1 million by the time they're 65, give them a little boost, right? Do you know how much it costs a 1 year old to buy $1 million? You want
Oh,
to
I
guess?
cannot do that math off the top of my head.
It's $2,400.
Wow. I was going to say
Two
10,000, $2,400. Yeah.
2,400. So it's an extreme example, but I think it does a good job of showing like literally it's just cheaper to start now,
Hmm.
even if you're in debt, even if your income is inconsistent, which we've already debunked, that'll always be the case. With debt too, I always tell my entrepreneurs, I'm like, I love that you want to pay off your debt for sure. But also your business might always be in debt because debt is a business tool, especially once you learn how to use it well. So never use debt as an excuse to wait to build wealth because buying it now is cheaper than buying it later. And it is probably like if we think about like, oh, well, Gina, the interest I'm paying is so high. I'm like, yeah, but it still might outweigh the interest if you start building wealth now. So a lot of it is that it's like getting past our mindset barriers. And they're not, maybe I wouldn't even call them mindset barriers, just getting past our lack of information or our misled beliefs. Another big one I have with entrepreneurs is, well, Gina, what if I need the money? I can't afford to lock my money away because my business might need it. And that's just a strategic difference in the type of account you put the money in. Like, yeah, if you put your money in retirement accounts, it could be quote unquote locked away, which by the way, you can still get that money out. But there's also this thing called a taxable brokerage where you can just put as much money in and you can take it out whenever you want and there's no penalties. So a lot of it is just education. I've had
Hmm.
smart women with master's degrees, CPAs, lawyers, accountants who are still misinformed about how some of this stuff works because there's a lot of fear when it comes to money. Like, I don't want to do it wrong. I don't want to click the wrong button and accidentally trigger a taxable big mess. I don't want to do da 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 da. So, a lot of it is education. But what we do
Hmm.
in the mastermind is really simple. We organize your money like a millionaire. So, we have a organizational system because I am so sick of seeing entrepreneurs with like 10 different accounts across 10 different banks or financial institutions. This again comes from my experience when my dad passed away. Everything was organized. He
Hmm.
not only had a will and trust, lawyers love that. He not only had the will and trust, the whole thing set up, right? But he also had a 6-page document that he just wrote for me with instructions. Hey, Gina, when I die, make sure to get 5 copies of the death certificate, contact this person at the firm, contact this person, contact that person. And even with all that organization, it still took 2 years to close down the administrative trust. 2 years. So I care a lot about administrative time and cost. I want all your money to be organized in a way that's the easiest for you to manage and your descendants to manage one day.
Hmm.
We then talk about, the good old fashioned retirement. We then talk about saving in debt and all the other goals you might want to accomplish right now in your life, paying for a maternity leave, paying for a trip, paying down debt, buying a home, all of that stuff. We then talk about protecting those assets that you accumulate. I do not offer legal advice. I am not a lawyer. I'm not your lawyer. But I do provide these really helpful worksheets, kind of like that. My dad had that list of things for me. I provide these worksheets for my clients to say, here, go through this with your spouse, go through this with your parents, go through this with your sister who isn't married and, has her own stuff going on, and then bring it to a lawyer. And you'll have everything ready for your estate planning lawyer, and they'll love you so much as a client. And it's really just this stuff, this chipping away at these tasks that don't actually take a lot of brain power. They just take a little bit of education and support. And then once you have it set up, like my wealth portfolio is set to scale to about 10 million by the time I'm 65 if I stop contributing, which I'm still contributing for tax reasons, but I digress. And it takes me about 5 minutes a year to manage it. And those 5 minutes include login, download 1099s, send 1099s to accountant. Like that's all it really takes. Once you set it up, this is what I'm talking about. Passive, no work. And if I wasn't here to do that work, somebody else could download those 1099s for me. So
I loved your analogy with you can buy it now,
yeah.
right? That was brilliant. So many great analogies. For those of you who are like, oh my gosh, I need Gina in my life, and don't we all, you can check her out at ginaknox.co. And she regularly hosts a webinar, and it is Pay Off 5 Figures of Business Debt in 2025. And we will put the link to that in the show notes. So definitely go check it out. Gina, thank you so much for coming on the show. This was so helpful, so valuable, and you are clearly doing what you are meant to do. You can just feel the passion when you are talking about it. So thank you so much.
Thank you so much for having me. This is so fun.
Thank you so much for joining me for this week's podcast. If you're watching on YouTube, give the episode a like and leave a comment below so we can keep the conversation going. Also, be sure to subscribe to the channel so you never miss a future episode or announcement. Listening on Apple, Spotify, or another podcast app, you can watch the video and join in the after show conversation by visiting hustleandflowpodcast.com.